Welcome to Shorty Supercoach and welcome to the Brisbane Lions preview. I'm back from Gold Coast. It was a great time. For those of you that didn't know, I went there for New Year's. Took the plane up on New Year's Eve, worked the day, got away at about 3 o'clock and charged up, and it was great. As you can see, I'm probably still in the midst of unpacking. Those that maybe know me well might argue that my room always looks this way, but nonetheless, it was a great time. I was back to work today, or yesterday, by the time I post this, and a little bit flat. Doesn't quite compare to sitting by the pool and sinking cans as soon as 6 o'clock hits with your mates, but that's okay. We're back to reality now, and I'm going to take a look at the Lions. We're talking about the lock, the risk, the breakout contender, and the guy who's no chance for my side. Shout out to Jack Watson. He's going to move in with me pretty soon. You might have seen him on the channel a couple of times, or at least via the old podcast. He's a massive Brisbane Lions fan. So, mate, I'll be interested to see whether you agree with me on a couple of these. But and I'd love your thoughts too, whether it be in the comments or just in person. But I'll chat to you soon. The lock's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Lachie Neale, absolute superstar, Brownlow medalist. Since he's come to the Lions, he's just been the man, hasn't he? He's just dominated. So he's revelled in the opportunity to lead that midfield, and he's a lock. I mean, of course, he's going to be expensive, but there's probably no bigger ball magnet in the game than him. So if you're going to spend cash anywhere and want to know what you're going to get back, he's about as bankable as there is. And this is probably over the next two categories with the risk and the breakout is where it gets a little more interesting. The main risk I've got is Dane Zorko. Now, I think with his forward eligibility, I touched on him in a little bit of the dual position video that I did a few days back. And he's a really interesting guy because he's nearly 32. So you're going to turn 32 early in the year. And we saw even last year that we're catching a little bit of him more in the forward line, and that concerns me. And obviously, it says itself. He's now available as a forward, so you got to accept that to a little bit. But he does concern me with his age and the fact that maybe this next generation of Brisbane midfielders might just see him not average poor, but I don't think we're going to see him average three figures again. He averaged 97.9 last year. And it's just a matter of whether we feel he can maintain that plateau. If I'm probably thinking what would happen, I'd be suggesting a low to mid 90s. I'd be guessing sort of that 92 to 95 mark, which is nothing to be sneezed at, mind you. But I get a little bit nervous when I'm picking a guy that I feel's going the other way. You can have a little bit of optimism about guys who are on the rise and you feel like their best footy's in front of him. I think Zorko, his best footy is definitely behind him, but it's not to say he can't still play good footy. Now, I think the fact that you've got a lot of these younger types in Berry, McCluggage, even someone like Rayner perhaps, they brought Nakai Cockatoo to the club. He's going to want some midfield time, and Robertson, the young guy. There's a lot of players that are highly talented there, and I've probably missed a few as well. And I don't think Zorko is the sort of guy that is just a lock for every centre bounce like he has been at certain stages of his career. So it would be a no from me, but that's not to say he can't have a good season. I just think we do have a lot of good options in the forward line at this point. So I'm probably going to look elsewhere, I'd say. And this one, not necessarily saying, it'd be a big risk. You'd have a massive set of pills if you pick this guy, but Hugh McCluggage, I'm a huge fan. He averaged 101.5 last year, and that was up from his 94 the year prior. Now, this just has all the makings of a guy who's just, sometimes we see a huge explosion and a massive breakout. This is just a bit of a slow grind, finding his way in the game. He had to bulk up a bit too. This bloke's going to be an absolute star. He's got Scott Pendlebury traits about him, and I think he could definitely average over 110 at some stage in his career. I won't be picking him, but his name just stood out to me. And I think if he can just win a little bit more inside ball as his career goes on, I know it's not his absolute game. He's more of an outside type user, sort of can kick the goals as well. I know he's inaccurate at times this year, but he is a silky player. So I expect him to go improving on that average, and he can go big. And speaking of going big, I should have said when I was talking about Zorko, just finally on Zorko, I think if you do pick him, and this way is a bit off-putting for me, you're going to get your 140s, I think. There'll be games where he does kick goals and he does play midfield time and he goes huge. And his stats last year represented a little bit. You'll also get those ones where he has you pulling your hair out. So I think he's not going to be Mr. Consistent like he once was with tackles and consistent tons. He's going to be a bit more up and down. And McCluggage, he's shown he can go big. It's just a matter of, whether he can consistently get those, to average 101, like he had some big ones, equally had some lower ones, still a young guy in the game. But super talented. The Breakout, Cockatoo is the one that probably stands out for me. Obviously being a Cats fan, I've seen how much talent he has. I was spewing to lose him, but his body has let him down time and time again. If he gets his body right up there in Brisbane, like we saw with Lincoln McCarthy, he could be anything. He could be anything. He's got a great don't argue. He's tough, and we know the speed and class that we've already seen it in snippets. I just hope all these injuries haven't, curtailed some of that. But look, at the price he's going to be, we don't need him to break out too much. So he's probably more of a, maybe that's a bit cheating in terms of a breakout. It's more of a bargain basement sort of guy. So that's why I was looking at Brisbane. I'm like, where's a possible breakout contender? Because Cockatoo, a little bit obvious. But I've gone with a guy that I'm not going to endorse to select. But just if you're one of these fellas who likes playing draft against his mates, keep this one up your sleeve. And I love when we can break down a few stats. I like when you can just look a little bit deeper and find out maybe something that isn't as obvious on paper. And that's Oscar McInerney. Really interesting guy. I was looking at his stats today, and overall averaged like 82. Okay, solid. But he's a ruckman, 26 now. Like he's getting on like, I would have guessed he was like 24, but he's 26. And that's generally when we see ruckman hit their prime of their career. So I think he could be in his absolute window. I'm not sure, and this is where I'll bow to your better judgment, Watto. What's the Lions' ruck dynamic going to look like? Because a lot of last year he was impaired by Steph Martin, and he's out now. So Archie Smith was a little bit similar. I think Smith played, it was 5 games, and Martin might have played 7 or 8. So what I did was I broke down how many times did McInerney have to share the ruck, how many times did he go solo. Now the only times he did go solo were rounds 9 to 15. So that was 6 games. That included a bye. So I think early on it was a combination of Martin and Smith. And then later on it was also a bit of a combination. Then Martin mainly in the finals. So I've only gone home and away stuff, but real interesting. So the scores that he produced as a solo ruck, just on 6 occasions, small sample size, but 91, 128, 113, 99, 59. That was against the Saints. Just looking at the stats, he got beaten up by Ryder and Marshall. All right, everyone has an off day. And an 85 in round 15. So as a solo ruck, 6 games, averaged 95.8. Otherwise, 75.3 when he shared it. And we know how important it is for ruckmen to thrive when they are the main guy. He seems to fit that bill. He's gone from this lanky giraffe type fella to being, he looks more of a presence now. And I think he's ready to shoulder the majority of the ruck load. We'll find out throughout pre-season how that ruck situation is going to work for the Lions. But that's a small sample, but you'd also expect him to gain a lot of confidence and momentum if he was a sole ruck. And I could see him averaging close to 100, to be honest. And that's why it's tricky, because we got Grundy, we got Gawn. It's really tough. He sits awkwardly. He's so awkwardly priced. The ruck, we generally don't stuff around. So I'm not going to sit here and say pick him, but he could be a guy that some of your mates just aren't quite aware of what he could be capable of in draft. So he could get you a little sneaky selection for a backup ruck, or he could even be your first ruck, depending how the ruck situation at Brisbane looks. In terms of guy who's no chance for my side, Joey Danaher, he just sort of seems like the guy. I wouldn't be surprised if when Supercoach really gets going, most people start picking their sides, that he'll be cheap. People see Danaher and they think of all the good stuff he can do and they pick him. You know, it's like your classic rookie Supercoach era. You know, we can't be doing it. He's a key forward. He's injury prone as anything. What's he? I wrote it down. He's played 4, 4, and 7 games. And of course, yes, his average is low. He's been injured. He's capable of anything. He could be a superstar, but do not go anywhere near him in terms of Supercoach. I know he'll be cheap, but he'll just be a recipe for disaster, not only from a scoring point of view, but just his body. You couldn't trust him as far as you could throw him. So let's not go anywhere near Joey, although I do wish him well. He's an exciting footballer when he's up and about. So that's Brisbane for you. If you don't know already, I've teamed up with Supercoach Talk this year. So I have a couple of videos coming up where I more so talk about, well, I guess combine my site with their site and sort of create the video more in terms of their website, but it won't look any different. It'll just be my intro, sort of mentioning them a little bit more and talking about a few things I've got coming up there. So check out their website if you haven't heard of them before. Otherwise, I'll have a few more club by club previews coming up, and I'll get a feel for I'll probably mainly club by clubs at the moment, but some other things might pop up. But if there's stuff you want to see or you want to get in early for a player profile request, by all means. But let me know how you're travelling. I hope the new year treated you well. It's great to say goodbye to 2020. I know we're not through it all yet. There's a bit of shit going on in Victoria, and you know, Sydney's been copping it of late. So let's just hope we get through all this pretty soon. But on to the cricket as well. I hope you've been watching the cricket. I'll be back soon, guys. Cheers.